Hello, everyone, and thank you all for attending today. My name is Nicole Jarvis. I am an Assistant Director of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I will be tonight's host for this webinar. So really quickly before we begin, a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. Today's webinar is accredited for CEUs by ANCC, NASW, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and the Society for Human Resource Management. If you plan on receiving continuing education credit for this program or a general certificate, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must have logged on individually. Participants who listen in on someone else's line will not receive credit. And then you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as receive a passing grade on the post-test. Following today's session, you'll receive an email with all this information. That email will be sent by 5 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Thursday, March 3rd, and then certificates are sent out within 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. Also, please note the planners and presenters for this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and that no commercial support was provided for this program. Now, thanks in part to direct support from Genentech, HSN, and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer this 8th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This program was created to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information around the work-related issues that can arise after a cancer diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize our year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and, importantly, allow us to continue providing all resources and services free of charge. Now, today we're focusing on a specific element of the job search process, and that's networking. In general, networking tends to make people feel really nervous. The last 2 years of social distancing has made the process of networking feel a bit different, but today we're going to really cover the basics of networking, why it's important, and how to effectively network, whether you're able to do so in person or will need to continue to do so from a distance. So regardless of the format that you network in, it's really critical to get comfortable with it, as it is an essential aspect of job searching. And it's shown time and time again, it's a crucial tool for getting a job. So even if you aren't actively job searching right now, networking can aid in creating future prospects if you do decide to switch jobs or go back to work at a later date. We understand that each of you may have further questions, so we'll have time for those at the end of the hour. All questions that you want answered should be entered into the Q&A box, which is located on the top or the bottom of your screen. Please don't ask questions for Julie in the chat box. Please put them into the Q&A box. If you are joining us solely via phone today, you can press *9 on your phone, which will alert us of your question. So for those of you who have joined us for the last 2 webinars focused on aspects of job searching, you've had the pleasure of hearing from today's presenter, Julie Jansen. For those of you who are new to the webinar, Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who's helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find work that's gratifying. She's also written 2 books, but really most importantly to us, Julie is one of the original career coaches at CAC. She's been helping patients and survivors with their individual employment challenges for quite a while now, and we're so appreciative. Additionally, Julie is the coach who does our resume review service. So during this session, Julie's going to be providing strategies for successful networking that you can use during the pandemic and beyond. As I mentioned, following the presentation, there will be time for you to ask questions, but for now, I will turn it over to Julie to get us started.
Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate it. So networking, it's a pretty robust topic, and we'll be covering a lot of content in a short period of time. And as Nicole mentioned, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have. So I don't want to talk about the pandemic because we're all tired of hearing about it, but I will say that the pandemic has presented some real and positive opportunities to us. One of them is that there has been an accelerated climate of connectivity and helping in the business world in particular. And COVID-19 has shown us that we truly do need each other and have much to give to others, whether it's recognition, appreciation, advice, assistance, and job leads. So this has created a pretty nice, ideal environment to network. And no doubt, many of you, as I have been contacted by people in the last several years whom you have not talked to in years, people who have started using LinkedIn who never did really before. And you've probably reached out to people who you may not have reached out to given the pandemic. When people are going through a crisis, one thing that is reassuring are their relationships and their connections with others. So today's webinar is going to dig into the how-tos of networking that are effective no matter what, whether you're doing it virtually or whether you're actually in person again, as well as specific tips. And what I'll say first and foremost is, in my opinion, where if I look at myself, networking is the single most important skill that I developed early on, which has made me successful in starting my business, certainly many personal crises, 9/11, the Great Recession, and now the pandemic. Networking, if we go to the next slide, networking is an ongoing and I'm sorry, Scott, one more. Yeah. Networking is an ongoing interactive process of creating and nurturing productive relationships. So it's important that you kind of break this sentence apart. It's ongoing. It's definitely interactive, although it's not always even as far as the interaction. You're definitely developing and you're nurturing existing relationships that are productive for both parties. Approximately 85% of all jobs are found through networking. 80% of jobs are what's called the hidden job market. So that hidden job market are generally jobs that are created for specific reasons or jobs that just aren't posted at all. And most people you meet actually have 250 contacts. Most people would argue that that's not true. But if you say most people have that many, or if not many more, when LinkedIn kind of leaves it at 500 plus. So let's say only 250 people, those 250 people know 250 people, and then you end up having an access to like 62,500 people. And finally, 30% of all jobs are created through someone who knows you. So let's look at the barriers to successful networking. The first is your attitude. As Nicole mentioned when she kicked this webinar off, people generally don't feel too comfortable. They may even feel fearful. About networking. It's an extremely important business and personal skill. However, it isn't really taught anywhere unless you take a webinar like this, and it's often misunderstood and underutilized. So if you look at what you actually feel about networking, whether it's fear, discomfort, some people are actually disdainful and say, I don't need to network, it doesn't work. It may be a lack of understanding about how to actually network, what to say, what to do. And then the mentality that I see this a lot where people say, well, I don't need other people, I can figure it out myself. But the truth is, you can't really achieve anything meaningful without the help and assistance of other people. And you're automatically putting yourself at a risk of non-acceptance, or just a lack of confidence. And we'll talk a little bit later about how do you approach some of those people that are a little more senior, or you may feel a little bit intimidated by or insecure. And your cancer experience actually can diminish your confidence even more, just generally in job search, let alone in networking. So it's been proven that attitude drives behavior. And if you let any of these feelings I just described dominate you, very simply, you won't be successful at networking. And the only way that you can shift your attitude about networking is if you face your feelings, continue to try it, and I guarantee you will begin to see positive results. The other major obstacle is time management and organization. So staying organized, letting other things take precedence over networking activities. You're probably aware of the principles of time management. When push comes to shove, it's all about having small goals, keeping focused, staying motivated, And it's likely that you almost always feel overwhelmed and too busy. So the best way to fit networking into your life is to make it a priority by weaving it into your life instead of just viewing it as another task you have to get done. Ken Blanchard once said, managing your time isn't the real issue. Your time is fixed. What you need is to manage the activities that are consuming your time. So if possible, use some sort of digital system for organizing and documenting your activity. And one more key point, the fact is, most people don't network as often when they are working. If this is true of you, and at some point you need to look for another job, it's much harder, even emotionally, psychologically, to revisit your network than it would be had you kept in touch with everyone all along. And the interesting thing about networking is we do it all naturally in our personal lives, whether we realize it or not. And how many times have you said, where did you buy that? Who is your accountant? Have you tried that online meal delivery service? This is simple networking. And for some reason, people have difficulty transferring this to their professional or work lives unless they absolutely have to. And I don't need to tell you that in this era of continued social distancing, learning how to network digitally and virtually has been a necessity. And I will also tell you the basic principles of networking has not changed in the entire existence of human beings. So moving on to what I call the 5 sources of networking. The first source, and I would say the most effective, and these are groups or communities for you to turn to in order to reconnect with people or find new people to network with. The first source is your personal and your professional network. So most people will say to me, I don't really have much of a network. The majority of people answer that question that way. But you do have contacts. Everyone has contacts. So one of the easiest ways to identify people is look at some of these categories. If you're looking at the slide, friends, past colleagues, former classmates, teachers, neighbors, your kids, friends, parents, real estate agents, dentists, accountants, you name it, hairstylists, all these people know people. So if you were to open up a Word document on your device or just use a notebook to write them down by category and then search for these people on LinkedIn or Facebook and invite them to connect with you or become a friend, then you can automatically start off with a group of people, depending, of course, on how many people you're connected to on LinkedIn. And so speaking of LinkedIn, I've done, and some of you may have participated in the webinar that I did on LinkedIn this year. If you are resistant to LinkedIn, it's time to overcome that. As I've talked about before, it's definitely the most widely used business-oriented social network in the world. During the pandemic, I know for me and for my clients and for most people I know, it's been a lifesaver, and it will continue to be so. It's 650 million people in 200 countries. It's not just a database, it's more robust than that. And it's not just about large numbers of collecting contacts, but also making meaningful relationships. And these relationships, as you probably are aware, are in the forms of connections, which vary by degree. So a direct connection is a first-degree connection. A second-degree connection is someone that is connected to one of your first-degree connections, but not to you. And then there are third-degree connections. And as I mentioned, anybody you meet, I suggest that you send an invitation to connect with them, and that will serve to refresh your memory about them moving forward. And always be sure to personalize your invitation rather than clicking on the default invitation. I use LinkedIn to help my clients by introducing them to my connections. And this is a good example of reciprocity, which we'll touch on in a few moments. And while typically LinkedIn has not been a replacement for face-to-face networking in the last year and a half or 2 years, it has been instrumental to networking. And be sure to thoroughly update your LinkedIn profile, use connections for recommendation, ask connections for recommendations, join groups that you're interested in. And LinkedIn is so easy for us to keep up with people by looking at what they're doing, sending them quick messages, which you can then move over to regular email if you would like. And remember to ask your connections on LinkedIn if there's a problem that they need help with or someone you can help connect them with. And then comment on your connections posts, and then there's so many things that you can do on LinkedIn and just sit there for 20 minutes a day. Okay, so the next group of people, or the next source for networking, is what I call influential people. On the next slide, influential people are people who know people who know people. So those are people who need to network as part of their jobs or their careers. Not just because they may be senior level, but they may run trade and professional associations, business consultants, salespeople, executive directors of nonprofits, people in the government. They all know a lot of people. They're very comfortable introducing people. It's very important to them to continue meeting people. So it doesn't mean that they're so important that you can't bother them and reach out. In fact, I think most people who fall into this category would be more than delighted to help. The next category is what I call people and companies in the media. So there's lots of publications, online publications, where they feature people who are in the news. There's a lot of local area business journals. I know people who are attending this webinar are all over the United States. And so if you check out www.bizjournals.com, you can learn more about businesses and industries in your area. There's calendars of events. Most of them are still virtual, but they're now moving in certain parts of the country, certainly moving towards in-person types of events. But people who have been promoted, people who are just featured for whatever reason, those people are also similar to the influential people. Those people are very accustomed to connecting with others and meeting strangers and networking. So trade and professional associations and organizations is a big one. There is a trade association, I would say easily, for almost every profession that exists. Whether you're a diamond grader or a puppet maker, or you're in marketing or HR or finance, and even digging deep to finance is a huge industry. So there's very specific associations just for analysts, for planners, you name it. There's a trade association. And I'm always surprised by when I talk to people and I talk to them about their networking efforts, and I say, well, when was the last time you reached out to your specific trade association or professional organization? Most people will say, oh, I did that when I was maybe early in my career, but I kind of forgot about that. And they all have websites, and a lot of them post jobs. And it's a great way to affiliate with people who have similar professional or even personal interests. So it doesn't just have to be business. It can be civic or cultural or religious or government groups or hobby, or, there's tons of Facebook groups associated. I mean, I'm on a Facebook group, sad to say, for people with cats with kidney disease. I'm not too involved because it's very depressing, but I mean, it's just that specific, and it's all about helping and connecting. So definitely don't overlook trade associations and organizations. And one tip I always used to love giving people is, yeah, it's great to join trade associations that are for people that do what you do. So like for me to join a couple coaching organizations is nice, but also to go to trade associations or organizations that are different than what you do, because you will be the only person who does what you do. So if I'm going to go to a marketing association, I might be the only coach, or maybe there might be one more coach, and that kind of helps you stand out. So this is one of my favorite resources for networking. And then there's recruiters and search firms. So connect with industry and functional recruiters using LinkedIn. They're all on LinkedIn, and asking people in your industry for referrals to recruiters. So almost everybody knows at least one recruiter, and I'm talking about external recruiters, and also internal recruiters. They both can be very open to connecting because, and especially right now where companies are having a really hard time hiring and filling all their positions, they're going to be more open to connecting with and networking with people who reach out to them generally. And even if a recruiter isn't working on a job that specifically fits your experience or skills, recruiters are usually open to connecting, and don't be intimidated by recruiters. Sometimes people give recruiters this sort of false authority, but they're just doing a job just like everybody else. And, I hate to say it, but they really only place or interview candidates who are fit for jobs. So they don't really help career changers. So if you are a career changer, as many of you can be, realize that it's unlikely that you will be noticed by or interviewed by a recruiter if you're making that career change. So it's kind of like I always say, it's kind of apples to apples with recruiters. And don't be offended. They do get bombarded. So don't be offended if you don't get a response. And obviously connecting with a recruiter through a mutual contact is always the way to go if you can do that. So, but stay in touch with recruiters on a regular basis. The few that you know, or the few that you talk to, offer them help, refer candidates to them, so it doesn't seem like it's just about you. Okay, so now those were the groups of people. Now let's talk a bit about how you can invite people to network with you. And right now, it still pretty much is video or the phone. In the next, look, here's just a challenge, and I'll just say, with rare exception, every day I send emails, text people, or invite people to connect on LinkedIn. I comment on LinkedIn posts or updates, and I even make occasional phone calls that are just about networking. And I've done this my entire career, regardless of what my job or situation was, and it's really paid off. And so this is the challenge, is for you, in the next 2 weeks, reach out to 6 people you know well, you haven't talked to in a long time, or even whom you'd like to meet. And I'm happy to be one of those people. I always suggest to the participants of these webinars that you invite me to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm always surprised by how few people do that. Sometimes it's a good number of people. Most of the time it's not. And then when you reach out to someone, think about what it is you need specifically, and it might be information, it might be a resource, it might be insight about something, and explain what you're looking for, such as, we worked together in the past, or you are familiar with this industry and I'm reaching out to connect with you. So you're not at that moment asking them specifically for help. You're basically telling them why you're reaching out to them, reminding them, if you knew them in the past, of who you are and what your specific relationship may have been. And so just continuing to talk about how to invite people to network with you, because this is a area that people struggle with. It's nice to compliment people, obviously authentically, about something specific. It might be, their work experience. It might be a post that they made, and make it clear that you realize their time is valuable. You don't want to waste their time. If it's relevant, provide a very brief description of your background and your future goals. Like, I'm trying to network with attorneys, marital, family law attorneys, because I started a vocational expert business a few years ago, and they're not easy to network with. And so I'm like, it's one sentence of, if you have a client in a divorce case who has a spouse, her spouse is underemployed or not employed, I can make the difference by doing a vocational evaluation, and that's like just some grabber kind of sentence that doesn't go on and on and on about where you've worked and who you are and blah, 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 blah. Just people don't have the attention span for that. And then still talking about inviting people, once you move on to doing that on the next slide, what you want to do is offer format options. I'd love to schedule a video meeting, a phone call, maybe just send a few questions to you in an email at your convenience. And then just, again, I can't stress how you should keep everything brief. And if you can, think of a compelling subject line to increase the likelihood that the person will read your message. And the good news is everybody's email is available on LinkedIn. So if you don't, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn, but it can be cumbersome for some people to respond, or they just don't spend as much time prioritizing LinkedIn. So you can take their email address and, reach out to them and kind of go through these steps that I just described that way. Okay, so I mentioned reciprocity earlier. And so on the next slide, reciprocity is, in my opinion, the number one most important point about networking. It is the essence of networking is focusing on the other person first. So yes, of course you have an agenda. Yes, of course you have a specific need. You're probably networking more because for these reasons. However, your priority should always be the other person. And people know intuitively when you're really trying to identify with them and when you aren't. Be sincere. Don't ask them how they are if you don't really care. Hopefully you do. Or if you're not going to listen, be able to be comfortable, presenting your agenda, and be clear with reciprocity. You want to be clear about your expertise, your skills, the resource that you can be to others. So thinking ahead of things that you have to offer. So, I mean, as an example, I know that if someone wants to meet a person at another company, I can practically guarantee that I can make that introduction through my network of people, the benefit of having been in business for a while. But I was very good at that even at an earlier age. I worked really hard at that. And that was the resource that I could provide to other people. And I worked really hard at making people aware of that, my ability to do that. So, and with any networking conversation or meeting, always end with an action step, next step, so you have a reason to get back in touch with that person, whether you're offering them something like an introduction. And this is a tough one for people to swallow, this last bullet on the slide, but don't expect anything from people you contact or interact with. It's nice to think that, your best friends or your cousins are the ones that are going to help you. Usually that's not the case. You will be disappointed by the lack of assistance from people you thought you could count on, and you will be very surprised by the people who actually help you. So I just have to take a slug of water. Okay, so let's move on to making small talk and conversation. Interestingly, I got this question today from a client. I was coaching. We were talking. I told her I was doing a webinar on networking in the evening. I'm on the East Coast, and excuse me. She actually said to me, she's based in Connecticut, where I am, and she said, I just thought of a question. She said, I'm actually going to a conference in Texas. And I said, in person? And she said, oh yeah. And she said, I have forgotten what it's like. It's a business conference for her profession. She said, I've forgotten what it's like how do I make small talk, or what do I say? I don't even know what to say. And I said, oh, geez, I even thought to myself, even though I'm somewhat of, have expertise in this area, I thought, geez, I wonder how good I would be at doing that. It's been so long. So, but small talk and conversation is just as important online, on video, and in an email, if not more so. But what I've noticed is people kind of skip it a little bit more virtually. And it's just, it is harder to come across as more approachable or to create rapport and develop trust using virtual formats. So we know, we were kind of joking today when we were getting ready for this webinar, the Cancer and Careers, we were kind of joking about the fact that there's so many controversial topics that it almost seems like there's more topics that we really shouldn't be talking about than there are that we can talk about. And you don't, obviously politics, religion, COVID, vaccines, the war, or, the Ukraine. And I mean, it feels endless. So what do you talk about? And so let's move to the next slide and I'll give you some ideas. Okay, so you can, it's always in the form of asking questions of people first. So questions like, what was the first job you ever had? And remember, this is like your little ice breaking. What are you binging on Netflix? What's your favorite comfort food? Where's the last place you've traveled? I mean, a lot of people are traveling now. What's one of your hidden talents? And it has everything to do with who you're talking to and how well you know them or don't know them. But asking questions is, instead of you feeling the pressure of, oh gosh, I have to say something interesting. I mean, and you can, like with the woman whom I was advising today, I said to her, you could just walk in and say something simple like, oh, this is my 5th conference. We've missed 3 years or 2 years. So how are you feeling about being here? And there's this commonality that everybody has. And in Texas, they've been doing face-to-face things a little bit more. I don't know if any of you are from Texas now, but so it's like you can say surface things and it's okay. But I feel like it's better to have a few more interesting sort of questions in your pocket that you can ask people instead of just kind of talking about the weather. And then segueing to networking with people who are senior to you, whether you're doing it online. On the next slide, networking with people who are senior to you. So on the next slide, networking with people who are senior to you, approaching someone who is senior to you can be intimidating, but maybe less so digitally. Hey, Scott, do you mind flipping the next slide? Thanks. Okay, so while it's ideal to be introduced to a senior person, you can approach them directly if you have a plan. Something like, you could say something like, I think we're having a few problems with the slide, so bear with us. Oh, there we go. So I'd appreciate your advice, your input, your insight about. So people love giving advice, especially senior people who are dealing with people who might not be as senior. Or I'm working at expanding my network in the XX industry, and I would be honored if you could be part of it. You'll want to adapt your style to his or hers and be clear about what your skills and expertise is and follow up with them. And I always like maybe creating a very simple little agenda that's a couple bullet points and just saying, hey, I hope you don't mind, but I'm just shooting this little agenda off to you just so you know what to expect in our conversation. It's not like you're dictating what you want to talk about, but it helps apply some sort of framework to the conversation. And then at the same time though, and then always follow up. At the same time, be cautious about networking only with senior people you think can help you, such as C-level people or business leaders, because no matter what, while it's helpful to be known by these individuals, it's just as important to get to know people who are influencers and less obvious decision makers. And I can easily say, if I look back at my career and the people who have helped me, it was often people who were more junior to me and they didn't have anything to lose. And they were like, yeah, I can introduce you to this person. So keep that in mind when you're just focusing on, networking up rather than across or down. All right, so let's jump into the topic of networking etiquette. Networking etiquette it seems like it would be so simple and basic, but we know that not everyone possesses the same level of knowledge of etiquette. And so sometimes people just need sort of guidelines for etiquette. I think one of them is that, and I'm not saying, like I had mentioned complimenting earlier, I'm not saying you walk around just complimenting people, but people just don't get praise or they don't get positive reinforcement that often. I mean, I'm often surprised when I start coaching someone, especially in executive coaching where their company has hired me to coach them, and they will say, you know, I reviewed your background, and one of the reasons that I was interested in working with you directly is because of blah blah blah. And I'm still surprised. And wow, that, tell me how you did that. I'm still surprised when the rare person actually takes the time to not just start focusing on themselves, but to kind of compliment me. And it, you know, obviously, like every human being, it makes me feel good. So when it's appropriate, even on simple things, acknowledge and appreciate people. Anybody that you've communicated with for 15 minutes or longer, they should be acknowledged as a follow-up in an email or a text. If you say something that if you say that you're going to do something, try to do it in a timely manner, and always follow through, even if it's just a thank you, even if you feel like, I don't know what else this person and I could ever talk about. It's just nice to have that follow through, and try not to get so hung up on what to say and what to do next and when to do it. I've just observed that people just don't make decisions about contacting someone because they get so stuck in their fear of doing the wrong thing and what might happen and how they might be judged. And so, you know, at the end of the day, if you treat others the way that you want to be treated, with professionalism and courtesy and sensitivity, and you follow up and you trust your gut, you will be successful in your networking efforts. So now let's move to common networking mistakes that people make. Remember earlier when I commented that networking is commonly misunderstood and underutilized? I'm convinced that a significant reason for this is people are just not aware, or should I say self-aware, of their own mannerisms, their own style, or their behavior, and how it can affect others, whether in person or digitally. Nobody's interested in someone who is solely interested in their own agenda or who talks incessantly about themselves. But we've encountered a lot of those people. I know when I used to speak, but my last in-person speech was January 2020. And I spoke many times. And I remember always thinking people would line up after my presentation to ask a question, you know, which was great. I always loved that kind of interaction. What I'm happy about now is I don't ever have to shake anybody's hand again, which is nice because I never really enjoyed that. And I'm not germ phobic, but you know, at that point, it was like, so someone would come up and ask me a question, and then I'd answer it, and then they'd say, well, let me tell you more. Can I fill you in on my story? Can I give you more, you know? And I'd be like, oh no. And then behind them, I see there's 8 people standing there, and I would start feeling a little bit anxious. And this happened time and time again. And it has nothing to do with being a speaker. It happens in a casual, like at a conference or in a casual situation or on video where there's someone who dominates or someone who kind of self-focuses. And that's just one kind of mistake that people make. The others are not making it easy for your networking contact to help. So what I mean by that is, when, like, say I get an email from someone and they say, hey, you know, Julie, I'm in supply chain, and so-and-so referred me to you, and she said that you know a lot of people, and that's the email. And I'm kind of like, okay, I know what supply chain is, and that's great, but now I have to work hard at sending a follow-up email and saying, oh, thanks for reaching out. That was nice of someone, you know, of Kelly to refer us. What is it that you're looking for help with specifically? And then they'll reach back and say, well, you know, I'm looking for a job. I left my company in December, and I'm looking for a new job in supply chain. And then they don't even necessarily attach their resume, maybe because I didn't ask for it. I don't know. And this kind of back and forth can go on endlessly. And so I'm always the one who's forced to say, well, here's the 6 things I need to know. Do you want to schedule? They don't even say, well, I'd love to schedule a 10-minute phone call with you if possible. And that, just makes it feel very frustrating, like you're doing more of the work and you don't want someone to feel that way. The other thing, is we've talked about it, is reciprocity. So many people just either don't know that, or they don't know how to do that. Or I've heard people say, well, I don't have anything to offer someone. What do I have to offer? I mean, I'm the one who's feeling vulnerable. I'm looking for a job. But you do, everybody has something and many somethings to offer. And so you just need to spend some time sitting down, and you don't know what the other person could need or want. So you either decide, I'm going to tell people what I can offer, or you're going to say, look, I know that this is a reciprocal process, and we both want to be comfortable. And I know that there's a point where I'm hoping I can help you as well. And just saying the words really goes the extra mile. Disappearing after meeting or talking with someone. So, and I mean, I know that you can't, it's impossible physically to stay in touch with every single human being you've ever talked to or met. And it doesn't make sense. It's not rational. At a minimum, maybe you send a thank you. But there are people that you probably might have had meaningful conversations with, or you really connected to each other, and you just let time go by, and you don't, you're not in touch with them. And then you have to spend all this time saying, oh, we met in 2018 and blah, 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 And then also, this is pretty important, is forgetting to lighten up. So what I mean by this is, your situation is important to you, whether you're looking for a job or you're trying to change careers or whatever it is that you're seeking. I mean, obviously the context of this is job search, but as Nicole mentioned when she introduced this, there's a million reasons that we network. It's not just looking for a job. And it's nice to lighten up about it a little bit and just kind of joke or be a little self-effacing, and try to add humor and smile. I didn't really smile that much today because I should be smiling more. And I apologize for that, because I'm constantly telling my clients they need to smile more on video. But those are some things. And then a couple others on the next slide that are kind of networking mistakes. Is I guess I kind of messed up the slide somehow, but not knowing how to nurture a relationship instead of treating it as a transaction. And then my other one is sending LinkedIn invitations without personalized notes. So I don't want to talk ad nauseum about communicating with video, but I still see so many crazy things when people are on video. Like right now, I feel like I look kind of dark because it's dusk here and I have lights on, and very rarely do I do video when it's dark outside. So I don't know how the lighting is coming across. I mean, fortunately, I have a very professional background, but I know you know how to communicate with video. It's just, there's some tips I wanted to throw out pretty quickly, which is, it's a good idea to keep meetings shorter because of video fatigue. So I started offering 30-minute coaching meetings when the pandemic's a couple months into the pandemic. And I'm finding that I can get just as much done. It's a tighter agenda. People appreciate it. There's not really any wasted time. So if there's a way for you to just remember, 20 minutes, a half hour at most, that's great. Other tips for communicating with video on the next slide would be testing your technology. We've all had those snafus. We've all had it. I can have everything that's ever happened to me, where my battery died on my laptop, my earbuds made these wacky noises, my microphone stopped working. Try to avoid that. I coach someone it's an executive coaching engagement, and I have to laugh, and it doesn't bother me, but behind him and on every one of our meetings on video, there's a bottle of wine and an half empty wine glass. And I always have to laugh. And I finally made a comment about it. And we're at a point where we have rapport. So we joked about it. And I said, geez, is that there when you're, and it must be when he's, it's in the morning. So when his manager's talking to him or he's in employee meetings, I don't know. It's pretty funny. But, and then I don't love WebEx. And I mean, even Teams, I struggle with sometimes. I mean, I still find Zoom to be, they've done the best of staying current and up to date. And then just a couple more tips about communicating with video on the next slide. And that is just try to have like a shoulders and above view of yourself. I mean, if I go like this, you're going to see more of me. And if I go like this, you're going to see less of me. So just kind of figure it out and elevate if you're using a laptop. It's hard to make eye contact because depending on if you're using a tablet or you're using a laptop, like I'm looking at my camera now, I haven't been doing that most of the time, frankly, because I've been kind of eyeballing my notes. But if you can on occasion make eye contact, that's a good thing. And the nice thing about being on video is that you can put your notes there and people can't necessarily see them. All right, so then ways to stay in touch with your network. So here's some things you can do. And this will be the wrap up of, but people are always like, what do I say? What do I do? If I don't have a very obvious need, like I'm looking for a job, and you're not going to even reach out to someone and say, I'm looking for a job necessarily, depending on who the person is, just say hi. Look, we've been going through a couple rough years. How are you really? And just listen, and that's great. That's human. Share good news. I mean, we all do have some piece of good news, professional or personal. Invite them to something, whether it's an event, a yoga class, a virtual meeting. I send a lot of articles and I do quite a bit of posting. And so I like that because I like sending people new information, asking for advice. I'd love your advice. And send them a book title or a link to a podcast. There's lots and lots of great podcasts out there. And then on the next slide, just some other ideas, invite them. I noticed that when the pandemic started, like a couple of years ago, everybody was frantically doing all these virtual happy hours and coffees. And then everybody kind of went, ugh, I don't want to do that anymore. So I have like one friend and her husband she lives in Florida, who I still do a virtual happy hour with once a week, but I don't do it with anybody else anymore. I think it's kind of funny. Share competitive information. I mean, I'm in a great position because I can talk to a company in an industry where I know about other companies. Obviously, I never divulge specific company names or sensitive information, but sharing competitive information is good. And you can do that if you're going on interviews. You can share that with potential employers. An update on what's going on. Hey, I think I've been in a job search. Let me give you an update. I interviewed with these 3 companies, blah, blah, blah. Always introducing people. Sending a short list of target companies when you're in a job search. I love that one. When someone says to me, oh, Julie, do you know anybody? I go blank. Yeah, I know thousands of people, but I don't think I know anybody right now. But if someone says, do you know anybody at any of these 3 companies, and you don't want to send them a list of 20 companies, that I'm like, okay, let me jump on LinkedIn and see if I do. And I usually do. So that's great. And it makes me feel useful. And then finally, to wrap it up, networking has always been important. It will always be important. The pandemic and social distancing has created many opportunities for you to network, whether you have or not. Don't feel guilty if you haven't. It's never too late to start. I can't think of any activity or any task or achievement that can be reached solely on your own, as I mentioned before, without input, without creativity, intelligence, or systems from others. Networking will always exist. And ultimately, when you're a stronger networker and more people know you, or you're more comfortable reaching out to people, you will be approached more regularly with requests and opportunities. So make networking a way of life, not just something you need to find a job. You will eventually be able to network in person. It's around the corner, and all of the tips we discussed still apply. Back to you, Nicole.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. That was great. Just really quickly before we head into Q&A, here are just a couple of additional resources that can help for those of you who are job searching or who are in the midst of considering a job search. We offer free career coaching on our website as part of our Ask a Career Coach message board. This is where our roster of career coaches, including Julie, answer any questions you may have and allows you to get a little bit more personalized feedback to suit your needs. Additionally, if you'd like more information on conducting a job search during or after cancer, we have our Looking for Work section on our website. This has a number of tools you can download as well as our publications. Next slide, please. I also just want to point out that we have a number of free events coming up this year. Julie's going to be presenting on career change next month. And then here are a couple of additional upcoming webinars we have. And later this year, we are going to be introducing a few new topics. So for those of you who are joining us again, we have some new stuff for you. And finally, we have our Midwest conference, our virtual Midwest conference, which is taking place on Friday, March 25th. So if you are interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. Registration is open and free. All right, now it is time to open up for some questions. I see that they are starting to pour into the Q&A box, as they are known to do at the end of these. So we have about 10 minutes, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. Okay. Are you ready, Julie?
I'm ready.
Okay. So this one's from Jennifer. She said, "Hi, Julie. In our last webinar, you mentioned that you were not a fan of the available for work news that LinkedIn makes available. Could you say a little bit more about that?"
I mean, it's just me and my preference, and I know it works for people, but I don't know how to, let me think of, I've never really been asked directly that question. It's an excellent question. So why am I feel like it's just too obvious. You know, it's like, hire me, like you're wearing a sandwich board or something. I don't know. It just like, I like things to be a little bit more subtle. So that's just, I think it's just a professional preference more than anything. I don't think it's bad. I think it works for people. And it's not a very good answer, but that's my answer. Nicole,
Well,
do you have any thoughts about it?
I think, I think it goes to show that everybody has a different approach. There's not necessarily, there's very few things that there's a hard line on right or wrong, right?
Exactly.
And so it's things that you feel comfortable with, things that might maybe represent you a little bit better, and another person might be say no way, that's not for me. So I think it's just about kind of assessing your approach to things. For some, maybe that would open up conversations if they are a little I don't know, maybe a little shyer, right? And so this allows people to come to them, maybe or to connect with them on a level that, oh, I'm also looking, what have you found is helpful, just things like that. So I think there's no hard line. It's clearly just preferences in some circumstances. So
and I'll say one thing I just thought of when Nicole was talking is that it doesn't help your scanning results at all to have that around, so it's still more about whether you do that or don't. It's still more about having an optimized LinkedIn profile with the right keywords and less about the ring around your head or around your neck or whatever it is. Yeah,
for sure. Just going through some of these questions right now. We can both speak to this one. I'll start with you though. If you're not working because of your cancer diagnosis and then you start networking, how do you answer the question your contact asks, why did you leave your last job, without getting into your personal reasons?
Yeah. So that's really like, you would be asked that question on occasion, no matter the reason that you left your last job. So you would always want to have an answer that you feel good about, that you internalize, that you would feel comfortable sharing. And so if you're not comfortable sharing anything to do with your cancer diagnosis or your treatment, then you wouldn't do that anyway. And you would just say, I just my company was going in a different direction. I decided to take a break. And the thing I'll stress, like I stress over and over again, is the pandemic has been a game changer when it comes to gaps.
Mhm.
So I'm even surprised when we get that, get that question about like asking me why I left or why do I have a gap? Because it just really doesn't, it's not of any consequence anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely much less of a red flag than it was at one time. There's also a question here about how do you deal with being immunocompromised from treatment, but not wanting to have to lead with that and explaining why you don't want to meet in person. And I think what you just said, in terms of the pandemic, it's an excellent excuse for a lot of people right now. And for whatever reason, you could maybe not lie about things, but certainly get creative about how you approach them. Just saying, we're really being COVID conscious in our household, and I want to respect that. Would you mind if we meet virtually instead? Just you don't have to make a big deal out of it. And I think a lot of people are really understanding. Like, I understand everybody's kind of sick of Zoom, but it is a reality that we live in right now. It was already a reality before this.
Yeah.
And so I think, people are embracing it in a new way. Maybe just asking what their preferences are for scheduling. If it is a virtual type thing, are there certain times that you're going to be home or in the office that would be more convenient for you? Just, you don't have to give too much explanation for things. I think that is something that we deal with a lot with people who come to Cancer and Careers events, is feeling like they need to explain everything away. And the bottom line is that you don't, especially in a professional environment. You give the amount of information that is absolutely necessary for that person to know. And you can stop there and not feel guilty or feel like you're lying or getting out of anything.
It always feels bigger to you than it does to other people anyway, whatever it is you're worrying about. It's for
exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly. This question comes from Anna. Can we use our diagnosis and cancer experience to promote our story as a person and possible employee when applying for jobs in healthcare? I'm in nurse practitioner school now and hoping to work in oncology. If so, can you give us an example of how we can talk about this during an interview or while networking?
So, I mean, if you feel strongly about wanting to do that, then you should do it. And I would just caution you and say, just think carefully about assuming that people in healthcare will be just as compassionate or more compassionate than in another industry. That isn't always necessarily the case. And then it would just be aware that you're going to get different reactions, not the reactions that you necessarily always would expect. So just,
I'll tack on to that. Definitely a really common question that we get. I think it's really, when you're interviewing and when you're looking for work, it's really about sharing information that's necessary and really evaluating what the benefit is going to be to sharing that information. And as Julie said, you just don't know. So we definitely try to encourage people to maybe hold a little bit more information closer to the vest until you get a better sense of who you're speaking with, what the organization is like. I will say, from what I've heard, healthcare is not necessarily going to be super receptive to that information for whatever reason. Healthcare in general can be a challenging field to be in. You spend so much of your time taking care of others that a lot of the time, unfortunately, those working in the industry don't get the same support. But again, if it is something that you feel is, integral to who you are and you wouldn't feel like your genuine self, then you just want to think about how to best approach that. In this case, I would say the timing, once you've kind of let them know who you are, what you can do, what your experiences is on a professional level, then thinking about how you kind of introduce that into the topic, into the conversation. But again, I wouldn't lead with it personally, just because you just never know how people are going to take it. You never know what other people's experience with cancer has been. Maybe they have a mental block against thinking that someone is able to do this job after cancer. So you just never know. So again, it is a personal decision, and there's no one to say that you should or should not, but it's really just about giving it a lot of thought and consideration before you make that decision.
Yeah, agreed.
This is from Christy. Are there any people that you should specifically avoid networking with?
So like types of people or people, I don't think so. I can't imagine why you would avoid. I mean, there's some people that aren't going to be as accessible, because of their job or their title. They might be harder to network with, but I believe that everybody is networkable until they're not.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not someone that you've had a terrible experience with in the
Oh
past.
yeah.
But I think overall, I think that's the idea that you've gotten across throughout this presentation, is that it's not narrow.
No,
It's
it's not.
the opportunities are seemingly limitless in terms of who you can connect with, and you never know who someone else knows. Someone that's an actor doesn't necessarily only know people in the entertainment industry. They could have
Right.
family and friends, and so it's always worth exploring that.
Yeah.
So can we do one more question?
Sure.
All right, this question is from Ben. How persistent should I be? I've sent a message on LinkedIn and know they saw it but didn't respond to me. Should I just cross them off the list of people to network with, or would it be appropriate to send another message?
Oh, totally send another message, Ben. I mean, my rule of thumb is three times, obviously spacing it out appropriately, and don't say the same thing that you said in the first message. So shake it up as far as, oh, I noticed that you viewed my message. Thank you so much. Just trying to loop back. Hopefully this is less of a busy week for you, without creating guilt.
Right.
So absolutely, I'm astounded at how many people just give up after reaching out once and not getting a response.
Yeah, I mean, I
Persistence
think
is a wonderful quality. Yeah.
absolutely. And in this day and age when we're just inundated with information, it's so easy for things to fall through
Inundated.
the cracks, and
Yeah.
people might be more than happy to help you out. They just have to see the message first.
Yes. That's true.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, and this is an evening webinar, I appreciate you guys all sticking around for it. We really hope that you found it helpful, and we really appreciate feedback. So when we do circulate the online evaluation, we really hope that you'll take the time to fill it out, because not only does it help us in shaping our future calls, but it definitely helps us in continuing to receive funding to have these kinds of programs for free. If we weren't able to get to you during the call, please feel free to email us your questions at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll be sure to get the answers for you. Once again, the requirements for obtaining CEUs can be found on this slide. An enormous thank you to Julie for your insights. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you all next month for Career Change. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Nicole.